Good evening. Insert your own 20-second fart here. Okay, we dismissed the formalities, and something that I touched on yesterday that, between the volume of the forge and everything else happening, it was kind of hard to hear. And this is something that is mostly for guys like me, guys that don't have a whole lot of experience yet but really want to make blades. One of the hardest things to learn how to control is gauging the size of the raw piece of steel you need to throw in the forge to make a decent knife. This right here is a prime example. This has got to be maybe the fourth proper blade that I made. And I mean, I'm really happy with the end result just because I had validation that tearing the skin off a bowling ball made some really cool scales. But I jumped on something this big way too early because I didn't know how much steel to cut off to make what I wanted to make. I didn't realize it was going to be this large, even though the piece of steel I cut was huge, until I was just about done. So I started making this with a very limited understanding of the heat treat and a couple of projects that had gone okay. I think half of my problem here is I overheated the steel just a bit. I was running it in a single burner forge, so I didn't know you should pass it back and forth and get the whole thing heated up evenly all the way across. And I didn't preheat the canola oil I quenched in. So I have got a lightning bolt right in here on the top that spreads down into here, which indicates a cracked blade, which means if I take this out into the woods and start playing with it, probably about a 75% chance this thing is going to just kind of explode in my hand. I would be more devastated because I mean I spent a good 9 hours putting the bevels on and getting them as close to perfect as they can be given my limited skill. Thankfully I didn't freehand this one. I clamped it down to some angle iron and tilted my tool rest to make my bevel and went to town on it. Really what I needed to be doing was cutting a piece of leaf spring, because that was a piece of leaf spring that had to have been like that long all the way through before I hammered it out, moved it, and got everything shaped. And I was trying to get a tip like this, more of a scimitar shape, with this brought farther back and this brought farther up, and make basically a scimitar you take in the woods and destroy stuff with when you're bored. I didn't reach that point, so I took an angle grinder and I cut the end off and made what you see there, which still would have been imposing had the steel not had those cracks in it. This little guy is 01 tool steel, and the steel is clean, it is crack free. I haven't done a whole lot with this simply because I haven't had a need to. Like, I'm not in environments where a knife is necessary anymore, and when I was, since I don't have sheaths for these guys, it's impossible to really carry them and use them as EDCs. I do want to make a sheath for this one and carry it around. It's got its fit and finish issues, but I can live with those. It's one of the better projects I did, but I controlled the size of the piece of steel. This was a bar of 01 tool steel, and I just worked the end over until I got something that I wanted. And again, you can see I couldn't get the tip right, so I just took an angle grinder and cut it to shape. So that's something to think about. If you're new and haven't really mastered your heat treat, you haven't mastered your quench, you haven't mastered your forge, all that stuff, stick to smaller projects that are easier to control. Build your skills up so you're not wasting a bunch of steel. And believe me, if I'd have spent some high dollar on that giant chopper steel, I would have been furious at that point. But it was 30 bucks for all the leaf spring off the back of a Chevy S10. Can't argue with that. And I'm still trying to figure out how best to go about trying to make my own tongs. I want to make some tongs that the profile of the surface you use to grip, it's just a little tiny circle, it's round and more accommodating for various sized objects. The blade box tongs I have work great for what they are. They're excellent blade box tongs, but once things get past a certain thickness, They don't grip as well. The bolt jaws, they grip okay for that, but they are definitely intended for other things. So I'd like to make the happy medium between the two. And the problem is the mouth of my forge is only just barely bigger than a 3-pound hammerhead. I mean, you couldn't get the hammerhead in there and then pull it back out with anything without doing some damage. It's that tight of a fit. So I may come back to that today because I've got this steel that I suspect is 4140. It's thick enough that I could probably cut it into strips and go to town on it. Or I may get into the bag of the railroad spikes and do the Christian Gerber technique. So either way, that was just something I wanted to bring up and talk about while I had a few minutes to spare, and while I'm still trying to finish waking up. I haven't even changed shirts since yesterday. I went upstairs, enjoyed the fact that my arm hurt like hell, and crashed. So that's what I have for right now. Y'all have a good one.